All right, today we've got Mr. Brad Fowler, Alamance County Tax Assessor, right?
That's right.
And do they call you Brad, not Bradley, right?
That's right.
I'm going to let everybody know that your real name is Bradley Dean, right?
That's right.
So you can be looked up if everybody's mad at you. They can find you. Right? What are we? We're talking about taxes. We're talking about tax assessment and what you do as far as your position, but mainly to get kind of people familiar with what's going on with tax evaluations, kind of the increases, and kind of give some heads up of what's going on. So what do you do? First off, when you Google Brad Fowler, I'm totally ticked off at one thing.
What's that?
You do not mention, there's nowhere on Google that says you worked here in 2007. Why is that?
I was a top performing salesman at that. He's your only salesman.
I don't quite understand why, like, Hepler Realty is not number one as far as when you Google Brad Fowler, like it should say Hepler Realty 2007 to 2000, whatever, 12 or whatever it was, 11, 10. Before it says all the accomplishments that you've done and all the speeches that
I was trying to distance myself from
you was. Well, tell us what you do as far as tax assessment and your position.
Yeah, sure. And first of all, thanks for having me. I think this is something that you and I talk about quite often. As crazy as that seems, you're in the real estate business, I'm in the tax business, and so you call with questions, and this gives us a time not only for us to connect more on that, but also to connect your clientele and the public with what tax assessors do and kind of terms of revaluation. What does that mean? The appeals process, exemption programs. We can kind of go through all of that as we talk today. But my primary job is to assess all property in the county. I currently am the tax administrator in Alamance County. We have about 80,000 parcels in that county that I'm responsible for making sure that the assessments for property tax purposes occur, as well as all our business personal property, registered motor vehicles, and that sort of thing. But primarily, and the one that folks most key in on is that revaluation and that property tax for real estate.
As far as real estate.
Yeah.
So what are you seeing as far as, you don't have to tell me everything, but what are you seeing as far as the actual general public coming in? Now, first of all, have y'all in Alamance, have y'all done your increase like some of the surrounding areas?
So we have a 2027 scheduled revaluation. Gotcha. So we will have our January 1, 2027. It'll be our first time in the last 4 years that we've done that. Guilford and Davidson here in Davidson, they've done theirs this past year.
Right.
And so I'm sure you've gotten a lot of calls about that and talking with some of your clients and stuff about that.
I have.
Process.
Yeah, I've done, I've helped with 22 appeals here around the office in mainly Thomasville, Lexington area. But, a couple of other agents here have done, 5, 6, 7 comparable sales, kind of given to the client to maybe do an appeal with. And I've already actually heard some of them got results back, which I was super kind of surprised that they got an answer that quick. And that was for Davidson County. So your county, Alamance, is for 2027 scheduled. Is that already pretty much appraised as far as for the 27?
Yeah. So what we did there in Alamance is we have an outside firm that's conducting the revaluation for us. A lot of counties will do that just because they don't have the capacity.
Sure.
So we have an outside firm. They started their work about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, in which they will go out and review all the properties in the county, making sure that the listings are correct or as accurate as possible. And then subsequent to that, they start in on the valuation process. So in the last week or two, they have finalized the review process, and now they're starting into the valuation phase. Because the effective date of a revaluation is January 1st of, in this case, 2027, they're just now analyzing the sales data that will be utilized, and will do so all the way through the end of the year.
I got you. So how long from start to finish you think that process is to let people know? It's not like, yeah. I think a lot of people around here, they're thinking that you guys are just like clicking a button. It's like, oh, your house is doubled, and that's what they think, but that's not what happens.
It's not at all. It takes a good 2.5 years to conduct the revaluation.
Wow, that's longer than I thought.
And then on the back end, you factor in the appeals process and that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's even longer.
Soup to nuts, you've probably got 3 years invested in a revaluation.
Wow. And then you might have said this, it's every how many years as far as Alamance County goes?
Yeah, so North Carolina General Statute 105-286 says that all counties in North Carolina must conduct a revaluation at least once every 8 years.
8 years. Okay.
Alamance County is much like the rest of the state now, in which they have elected to advance that cycle to a 4-year cycle. And that just allows us, or the county, to keep values and assessments very close to one another. So, folks, those 8-year spans, if you can imagine, that's a violent swings that folks would see in their property values.
Yeah.
So four is bad enough, I guess you would say, and then you have the 8-year.
And you got the 8-year. Yeah. I mean, I've heard a lot of different things, and I'm going to be completely honest. Like the ones that I've ran are, of course, of different county, but I'm sure you see the same thing. A lot of the complaints, I'm being honest, is usually they've got the value pretty close. I mean, some of them obviously could be, looked at as being a little high, but, the ones that I've looked at, I'm like, well, really, it's kind of close to where it used, it really needs to be. And they're like, oh, no, it can't be that high. I bought it for this. And it's like, yeah, but you bought it 15, 20 years ago,
Yeah.
So it's an argument.
And I think that's important for, you're in the business. And so you see sales, you see transactions, you know what these things are doing day in and day out. The general public, unfortunately, they do other jobs, they've got other careers, and so they don't see that interaction. So you kind of have a different perspective, and and so it is eye opening, especially in the last few years since the COVID timeframe. We saw incredible changes in the real estate market, increases, and so that's captured during the revaluation as we're trying to reestablish the tax base there and support fairness and equity by reallocating values as they need to be. So it's good that you're able to talk to them about that.
Yeah, I think really the problem that I see, in this office at least, is 2022 roughly, maybe coming out of 2021. This was past COVID. We had just a crazy increase in sale, not just volume but prices. As far as value on actual sales. So, for instance, for the general public, if you've got 10 houses on one street and 8 of them sell in about a 2 years period, 22 to 23, and they all go above appraisal, that is completely what happened. Some people were given, $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 over list price. Well, what do you think that happens to the next house? That house sold for $10,000 more than their list price. Now that's a comparable. So that's kind of what happened in the general area here, and it created just a problem of. It sounds crazy to say it's a problem of higher value, but people just didn't understand why. Why is my house tax value now? It's $100,000 more than I paid for it, and I bought it in 2009. Well, in 2009, different market, lower values, and then of course we hit 2022. So that's what we see here. How did you start? Like, what was your first position? We'll kind of ask that. Besides the main position at Hepler Realty here in 2007. And this is when I did the first episode with Brad Fowler, is because he's the first one that came here to Hepler Realty. I was a one-man show, 2006. Brad comes in 07. I should have your sales here, but you did pretty good first year or two.
Too bad.
You did good in a kind of a weird, wonky market. Of course, everybody knows, 08, 09 was pretty rough. And that's when Mr. Brad Fowler was selling. So what is your first position after that?
Yeah, so I started in Davidson County back in 2005. I actually started out in land records, which is the deed transfer process and putting those things on the books. Okay. So that was my first role there. And then very shortly thereafter, moved into the appraisal side and worked as a real estate appraiser for the county. And then moved on to Mecklenburg County, where I was into commercial appraisal there, ended up being the commercial property manager.
So you've done residential and commercial. I don't even know if I realized the commercial end of it. So you did residential and commercial.
Yeah, residential and commercial.
Okay.
And long story short, and I've been the tax administrator in a couple of different counties, Catawba County and now Alamance County, but also was the deputy in Mecklenburg County just before I took this job. I've been there for about a little over a year. As the tax administrator over both assessment and collections, so it's quite a task sometimes.
How many people are in your departments?
Right now we have 31 people.
Okay.
Over both. It's a much smaller shop than what I was accustomed to in Mecklenburg, where we had 125 people in the office.
Yeah.
But it's still it's a challenge because, sometimes the smaller jurisdictions are actually a little bit more difficult because folks are having to kind of juggle many different things, where in like a larger jurisdiction, a Mecklenburg County or a Wake County, they're able to specialize more and focus more just on one particular piece.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, that's a lot of people. Actually probably more than I realized that you had kind of to look over. That's a job in itself, just managing, and people don't realize that. I mean, if you look up Brad again on Google, it basically says he's like the tax wizard. So like he's done all these different things. Y'all have heard, kind of where he started. He's measured houses, right? I mean, you've done, the walking around properties, residential, you've done commercial, you've been a tax assessor, different counties. Like, I don't know anybody else that would have more knowledge over this subject than you. So that's why you're here, not just because you were the first person that worked for Hepler Realty, but you are the tax wizard. So what do you think is the biggest misconception when somebody, as far as just Alamance County or really taxes, in general, what do you think the most hard thing that you hear people, the public, say that's really not right?
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing is everyone waits for a revaluation. And the idea behind that is the revaluation is going to make my taxes go up. And unfortunately, that's not the case. The revaluation level sets values and promotes fairness across the different property segments across the counties that it's occurring in. It is the county commissioners' jobs and the municipalities, their leadership, the city councils, to put a tax rate that will suffice for the budgetary needs of that county or that municipality. And so it's really that rate adjustment is where you will find if there's going to be a tax increase. Every year that a revaluation occurs, a county and or the municipality has to put together what's called a revenue neutral tax rate and advertise that to the public, so they're aware of what revenue neutral would look like. So I think the biggest misconception, once again, is that a revaluation makes your taxes go up. That on its face doesn't accomplish that. It simply redistributes the tax base fairly across the different properties. And I always try to explain it to people as if you and I have houses in two different areas of the county, and the area of the county that your house is in is growing much faster, and mine's not growing as much, my value is probably going to be diminished a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And so the revaluation is a chance for us to capture those differences. And so you're paying on what your property value is, and I'm paying the fair value on mine because it's a little bit less in that less desirable location.
Right. Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think a lot of people will understand that once they, kind of take a minute to think about it. What would you tell the average, person paying taxes in your county about any kind, and y'all might not even deal with this at all, but like the neutral, we hear a lot in Davidson County, a lot about the neutral tax rate, as far as the tax rate changing to make it kind of a neutralized, your tax value is going up, but your tax rate possibly could go down. I think they're voting on it actually in like 2 or 3 weeks here in this county. But do y'all deal with that as far as the tax rate, as far as, like moving the tax rate at all?
The tax office proper does not. That's really a budgetary decision made by the county's budget office, as well as the county management, and then subsequent the county commissioners would vote on it. But yeah, they do have to, once again, they have to advertise that revenue neutral rate, and all that revenue neutral really means is that the county is going to bring in the same revenue and only account for natural growth. There is no growth considered for the revaluation. Once again, that's not a means to raise property tax revenue. It is literally just a means to redistribute the tax base across the respective properties.
I got you. I think that's, it's one thing that we have heard in this office, is like, well, if our tax rate goes down, I'm in the city and this and that, and that's what we have to kind of not really answer. It's not really on us to answer, but at the same time, get enough information, so we can have an educated at least guess. It's like, well, yeah, the city taxes here are probably not. Now, what city taxes do you guys have in Alamance County that you're that they're also going to have?
Yeah, so we have, all of our municipalities there, they charge their own tax rate. They vote on that independent of the county.
Completely independent, nothing to do with the county. Yeah.
We collect for a few of them, but as far as having anything to do with their tax rate, the county doesn't at all. And same thing here. You have, Thomasville, Lexington.
Right.
They're voting on their own tax rate.
Their own tax rate.
Has nothing to do with the county.
Completely separate. Yeah. Okay. I got you. Well, what do you think the most favorite, if there is, I'm putting a positive light on what you do and all that, of course, is an important, huge responsibility. You know that because you've been doing it. And I've been kind of I've talked to you quite a bit over the last, decade or so or more, I guess. Let's see, 2007 to,
20 years now.
20 years almost. Yeah,
We're getting
it
old.
is 20 years. Yeah. You're getting old. I'm not getting old, but you're getting old. What do you think the most favorite thing of your position? You've got some positions that me looking in is I think you've done very well. I think you've, hit some very high responsibility, high reward probably positions. But what's your favorite where you're at now?
I think it's being able just to help the folks, the people that come into our office, especially when we talk about some of our elderly population. We have the state offers some exemption programs, and one of those is around some of our elderly folks who needs assistance. And when they walk into the office and are having trouble paying their taxes, because housing affordability is obviously a nationwide issue.
Sure.
It is really nice to be able to actually do something to assist them when we're able to. And to see them, just kind of take a breath because they've been stressing out over paying these property tax bills.
Yeah.
So I think for me, that's the biggest thing.
That's the biggest thing. That's good. I mean, that's great. On the other side, what do you think the hardest thing is? And a lot of people would imagine it would be the general public complaining, but what is and it may not be that. What is the hardest thing in your position now where you're at that is the biggest challenge?
I think, I don't know if it's so much that as folks complaining. I think it's more that folks don't understand and immediately assume the worst because the word tax is involved.
Yeah.
And it's something that the folks, the professionals that are in the business, we devote a lot of time to, not only trying to do the job and do it fairly, but also to make changes. I serve as the chair for the legislative committee here in North Carolina, and one of the things that we do annually is we push for legislation that will help folks in property tax. We're pushing for higher limits on our elderly exemption program. We're pushing right now and have a bill out there that is going to close some loopholes for some affordable housing that is kind of passing through, and it's to kind of help folks. So right now we have programs that help folks, but we could do a lot more, and so it's sometimes it's a little bit challenging because you hear nothing but negative,
Right.
And you want folks to know too that, hey, we're trying to help.
Sure.
We're trying to help out.
Well, I think the main thing is, you guys have obviously you got a job to do. It's important that county budgets and stuff, have the correct, not just enough, but the correct amount of funding, to come in to do the things that counties. I don't think the general public, in my view, this is completely me talking, but I don't think they realize how expensive it is to run, an entire county off of, what comes in. Everybody has the argument, oh, they got plenty of money coming in. It's like, well, if you see what stuff's cost to do these things that these counties are doing, I mean, I can't imagine what, the budgets have increased in all the counties around us, because everything, the general public knows this, everything's went up. It doesn't mean that stuff that the county spends on has not. That's what they don't understand. It's like if your gas bills went up, well, guess what the county gas bills been? It's not went down.
That's right.
So I think the increase is probably the biggest thing that I see. Is like you guys don't realize how expensive it is to run all this. And they might be in here complaining about their tax value going up $25,000. And I'm not saying that, I'm not minimizing that at all. But at the same time, it's like, it's probably accurate, if not still low here. And then you don't realize what the county budget, has had to absorb, and expenses have went up. So that's what I see a lot of. So your career has probably, you're probably right at 20 years in county.
A little over 20 years.
A little over 20 years. Okay. That's awesome. What does it take? Let's just say somebody was interested, and they see or watch this or listen to this, and they say, hey, that's a pretty good career. We're not going to talk about, what you make or nothing like that. That is actually probably public somewhere. But let's just say somebody, sees this on YouTube or listens to it and says, hey, I'd be interested in that. What do you think they would need education-wise and to start to get to your position now?
Yeah, really, there's no There's no real education requirements other than, you do have to be a high school graduate to ultimately to be an assessor. And most of the time folks are obviously looking for 4-year degrees and that sort of thing. But to come into the business and to start out as an appraiser, you really don't need a whole lot of anything outside of maybe that formal education. It's
That's
on the
interesting.
job training.
Yeah.
There's a lot of classes that are offered because it's like I tell everyone, this is an unchosen profession. No one wakes up at
It
11
says,
years old and said, I want to be a
I
tax
want to be a
assessor.
tax assessor.
So we definitely we need folks. We
Really?
need new folks to the industry.
Okay,
I
that's
know-
interesting.
Yep. And so I'm partnering right now, or attempting to partner right now with Alamance Community College and do some instructing there and try to bring some folks into a coursework there to hopefully entice them to come over and start working in our shop. And a lot of counties have those same issues right now. They cannot find
people.
folks to come in and want a career in the business. And it is a good career. It's a rewarding career in its own way.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of getting folks to kind of commit to it and learn and understand what the process is.
Yeah, there's a process, because it is a process, and it's I look into it and I think it's more complicated, but I'm sure on job training would probably alleviate a lot of the stuff that I don't quite understand. Some of the stuff that you've told me years ago, and I'm like, I have no idea what he's talking about. I'm not going to tell Brad that, but it's kind of over my head. Even been in real estate games, so all right. So that's interesting that they need people. That I did not know that. That was not in my research there at all. I missed that for sure. What can they do like right now for your county? I'm sure it's probably online posted, or is it?
Yeah. And we're I think right now in Alamance County we've got 2 open positions in our appraisal department, and so and then you look at other counties, bigger counties like a Mecklenburg or a Wake, they constantly have openings because it is a lot of times folks kind of fail to realize it can be a thankless job,
Yeah.
because it is taxes, and so you don't get the pat on the back like maybe an
Sure.
EMS or a police person would, but still there is very much value, no pun intended, to those roles.
Sure. What do you think? And this is getting in the weeds a little bit, but what do you think? And you may not know this because I don't know when I looked it up either, and I'm sure it's probably found online. But what do you think the average? Let's just say entry level, not your position, but the entry level. What do you think the average salary is if somebody listens to this and is really like legitimately serious?
Yeah, I think in Alamance County, our starting rate is somewhere between $50,000 and $55,000 a year.
Okay, so I mean, I think that's good.
Mhm.
I think that's great.
Yeah, it's a good place to start, and every county is different. Most of and then obviously the larger county typically is going to be a little bit higher
little
pay
bit higher.
scale, but that's also comes with the higher cost of living in those areas and that sort of thing.
Right.
So you would expect that.
Sure. That's interesting. I mean, I think that's, I'll get some people to disagree, but I think that's above average. That's above the average people that I deal with as far as, doing property management and that kind of thing, as far as their, application and income and that kind of thing. So, when I hear people, I can't find a job, and here you are saying, that they're hiring, for actually a pretty good career there. It's pretty interesting. What do you think, as far as what you would do? This is going to put you on the seat here, hot seat. What would you do different as far as your career, as far as, you've moved up, you've got the actual tax assessor, you're literally the wizard, of taxes right now, including, according to me anyway. What would you do different in your career?
I really don't think anything.
You just,
I
you're
think
pretty happy with the way?
I've been very blessed with my career. I've been even more blessed with the folks that have worked for me, but the folks that I have worked for. They've put me in positions and given me opportunities, and so I think that sometimes life and careers and things like that, it's all about timing, and I've been very fortunate. The timing's been good. The folks that I've ran into along the way has certainly helped me. And then the staff, just like now, the staff that I have, I'm one person. And while I may have some of the answers, the day-to-day work would not get done without all of them.
Everybody else. That's good.
So yeah, I don't have anything I would
That's
change.
good. That's good that you give your staff, you're giving your staff, kudos there. A lot of people don't in your position. So that's actually good and refreshing to see there.
I think I would have probably, one thing I would have changed is I would have never come to Hepler Realty. I think
Y'all hear this? Come on now. Y'all know he's lying right now. He's lying. Nah, yeah, that might have halted your career where you're at
That's
now. I
stunted
don't
my
know.
growth for sure.
Stunted your career problems there. Increased your problems. Nah, in 07, 08, probably 9, we were selling. You carried a real estate license, obviously, broker license, I'm sure, after 2 years or whatever. What do you think? Let's just think back there. Do you think, I guess, really not just Hepler Realty, do you think carrying an active real estate license helped you at all, as far as some people that are looking at or hearing of this or watching it and saying, do I need a real estate license to, get some of the education for some of it? I think it would help, but what is your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it absolutely helps. Understanding, the concepts behind valuation, the sales comparison approach, and just kind of understanding that as you go through that training for your real estate license. Understanding things like measuring a house. That sounds simple,
that's true.
and it's not that, it's not as easy as one would think.
Right.
So there's these little nuggets that you can pull out of that real estate training that certainly helps you. And just knowing some of the things related to contracts and deeds and that sort of thing, what they mean, the general definitions and things, that stuff matters, and was super helpful coming out of the gate.
Yeah, that's true. I think it's definitely at least gave me an understanding better, for sure, of most people, because, like I said, I've dealt with a bunch this time for this county, Davidson County, as far as valuations, and they've all pretty much got the same belief, that they are being treated wrong, and their values jumped up, and it's like, well, like I said, before you look at it and you really look at the history of what their values have went, and you look at comparables, it kind of makes sense of what the counties are doing to get them equal. I always thought, you might have the same or a different opinion, but I always thought for years, until really this year, it's like, why is the tax value, this is a realtor talking here, but why is the tax value so much lower, than what it's going to sell for? It was just off, very, very low. And of course, you can't publicize, I think your tax value is low, because they want their tax value low. They don't want to pay taxes on what it's actually worth. But my point was, it's like, I've always looked at it, it's like, well, why is it not accurate? So I think it's been off. I'm sure that, I'll have a lot of people in the public that disagree with that. It's like, well, he thinks my value's always been low. It's like, it's been low for a while from what we've seen, even on my own stuff. It's like, I buy it for this, for X amount of dollars, and the tax value's always been lower. Now it's kind of equaled out. On some of them a little high, some of them about equal, about right. So I feel like it's actually getting it more accurate. The accuracy, I think, is what people don't realize that they're trying to get to.
Yeah, and I think it's important to keep in mind, the farther away you get, just like now where we're at now, Davidson County has just went through revaluation. You mentioned your houses are kind of, let's just say, they're where they need to be. And now subsequent to that, the market, we hope anyway, will continue to go up as it typically does. But we don't revalue every year. As I said, it's once every 4 years. So as you see those increases, you get farther and farther away from that assessed value with the market value.
Yeah.
And then we go back to revaluation and equalize again. So, it's a good point.
I think some stuff on social media, literally recently as yesterday, I've seen that the majority of market, is going plummeting. The word was plummeting. And I sort of look into it, and it's from a kind of a title from Zillow. Well, Zillow, if you look up Zillow, basically the public place that you can see, what houses they think is worth. Zillow's never been to your house, by the way. But the actual article said 300 out of 900 that they actually looked into was going to drop possibly 2%. And I was like, that's not plummeting. If they think that's plummeting, they didn't, they weren't around in 08. So, some of the public stuff that people see is not actually accurate. So you got to, if you're listening to this, watching this, you got to really, kind of pay attention to, not just one thing on social media that pops up and says, the exact opposite of what your tax value might say or state, or a realtor tells you your house is worth, because not all of it, you can't believe everything online. So, what do you think as far as the next, let's say a shorter span? I was going to say 10, but let's say 5 years. What do you think values are going to do, let's just say from now until your next revaluation? What do you think they're going to do? I mean, you don't have a crystal ball, but
Yeah, I think that's super loaded. I really don't know. I think that, and I tell people this as I'm doing some teaching. I tell them this. If you had asked me when the onset of COVID a few years back, what the real estate market was going to do, I would have said it's gonna tank. And we both know that was completely opposite. And so,
what it did, yeah.
but at the time, you just couldn't tell. So I think that's the takeaway is we just don't know. I think as as things change in our overall economy, that'll be the test. But right now, I'd be reluctant to say either way.
So you don't want to put online everywhere what it's exactly going to do. Come on now.
Absolutely not.
Neither will Hepler Realty, guys. By the way, we was trying to get him to, say something out of the way there so we could get him, but we can't. That's kind of one of my biggest questions that I get asked, and it's like, I always like to ask that question because I say the exact same thing. I'm like, there's no way I can tell, in 3 to 6 years, 7 years, what your property is going to be worth. Do I think it's going to go up like it did 21, 22, 23? No, I do not. So that's kind of, that's the realistic answer usually. I'm seeing a couple. We've had, here in this office, we've had a few not to appraise. So when you start getting appraisals that don't come in, then you're kind of like, if you are in the business, like we were in 2008, and you start seeing appraisals in 2026 that don't come in, you're like, whoa, like, hold up, let's back up and see what's going on here. But when I say not coming in, that you look at the appraisals, and yeah, some of them are a little, they're a little bit probably low as far as what they should have come in. But at the same time, I'm actually started this year to kind of strong arm a little bit nicely to get pre-listings appraised. So that's something that I've started with. Got a licensed appraiser. Like, I'll tell a client, here's my number. Here's what I think your property is worth. If you don't like that number, I would love to get it appraised. This is what it's going to cost you roughly. And then we agree and get it appraised, and it comes in almost on the penny. So, and that helps with listing, listing prices. It definitely helps with, a buyer coming in when I've got one listed and I've got a written appraisal, that I know the value. It does help. What doesn't help is it is an opinion. So, you might get it appraised and you got a licensed appraisal, sitting on the counter, and the next buyer that comes in and makes an offer, their appraiser from their bank might be different. So I want everybody to realize too, just because you have it appraised, I'm not discounting getting it appraised, but doesn't mean that that's going to be the appraisal that the lender uses. Usually it's not going to be the appraisal that's going to be used. It's got to be from their appraisal, from their appraiser. Even if I have one in writing, they're not going to use it most times. FHA, you can kind of argue and maybe get one that's, if it's not 6 months old. But so keep that in mind. If you've got property that you really want an accurate value for, and we're talking, tax value today and tax assessing. And I do know that you do a whole lot of talking and speeches. And where's the last, let's just say 3 or 4, to kind of get an idea of the range of places and people that you talk to? Where do you go?
Yeah, so we spend, especially revaluation stuff, we spend a lot of time doing public outreach. I spoke 2 nights this week at our public libraries in Alamance County, trying to get the word out. I do speak also at a lot of our conferences and things to other tax professionals. Once again, as the chair of the legislative committee for North Carolina, I will go out and talk to folks about the pending legislation that's out there, things that we're having to kind of wrestle with internally with those pieces of legislation and that sort of thing. And then I also do some instruction. I teach for the International Association and teach across the country, usually about 4 or 5 times a year, to different folks in different states about property tax, because assessment and as far as the kind of the nuts and bolts of it, it's the same no matter where you go.
Right.
So I'm able to teach those classes to folks across the country, which is nice. Get out of the office for a little bit and still serving a purpose, hopefully somewhere else.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. Like I told you guys, Tax Wizard is this guy right here. 100% the most knowledgeable that I know of, for sure, without a shadow of a doubt. And I guess we'll come up to a closing here shortly, but what do you think, county wise? What do you think that they could do? And you're doing it. Don't get me wrong. You're speaking. You're doing speeches. You're speaking out. You're doing training. What do you think the county could do, best case scenario, to get public awareness higher from tax values?
Yeah, it's really hard. We have had so many. I have done so many public speaking engagements, and when you do those public speaking engagements, you don't get the reception that you would think. Folks don't come out to talk about it preemptively.
Right.
But I do think that it's important that everyone understands, and so just trying to continue to do what we do as far as going out, doing speeches, getting stuff online, social media, that sort of thing. And I think it's also important that for the general public to get involved and engaged in the process. And that doesn't necessarily, folks immediately think that's tax appeal. That's not necessarily the case. It can also be as simple as going online, looking at your property record before a revaluation ever
Right.
occurs, and ensure that that house is 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, that it is, your house is brick in nature, whatever, just to make sure that the property record is accurate. Because inevitably, we are doing mass appraisal in our offices, whether it's Davidson County, Alamance County, or Mecklenburg County. They're all the same. And in doing that, there is no way, zero way, that all assessments in that county will be exactly accurate.
100%. Yeah.
So that's what the appeals process is there for, but the public can certainly help and assist by going online and checking their property record. And once again, all offices across the state that I know of, if you give them a call, even if you're struggling to look that up online, they will walk you through that just so you can verify it.
Because I think most information they can maybe 10 or 12 clicks can get into their property.
Sure.
As far as most of the counties around us, there's a few that are a little harder to get into, but I think Alamance's is fine as far as fairly easy to find information on. And of course, here at Hepler Realty, if you either county, really any surrounding counties, if you have issues and you got questions, of course reach out to us. We don't have the knowledge of this guy, but we've got enough knowledge to point you in the right direction, pull you some tax cards, pull you some sales, sold comparables, and really get you some information of what your actual value is. We're not going to sugarcoat it. We're not going to tell you that it's worth, $100,000 less if you're trying to do an appeal. We're going to give you the right numbers because there is no skewing it. If you run 6 month sales, they are what they are. So I've done probably 22 or 23 different clients, to try to do at least look at the appeal process. A few did go through the appeal process, and like I said, already got answers. So that's one thing. What is your thoughts on as far as the real estate industry in a whole? Agents. We're talking licensed people working together with appraisers. And I know that that's kind of a really wide question, but I see a lot of kind of issues with agents having a different information. They have a different opinion. Like I said, it's an opinionated appraisal anyway. So what do you think the right way getting a true value? Let's just say general public walks up and says, I want to get a value on this property. Do you think in 2026 it's still probably the answer is getting appraised, like a license appraisal?
I think if you want to, something that will hold up as far as, across the board, I think having a competent fee appraisal done is always going to be the best answer.
That's the best answer.
Those folks are trained for it. I do think that real estate agents, especially, maybe some of the newer real estate agents or something like that, it might be a little different. But for somebody like yourself, you've been doing this for a long time now, and you said a big point a minute ago is that when people come to you, you're giving them the honest answer. I think that's the biggest thing. Some folks in the industry, unfortunately, to try to maybe garner some business or something like that, will skew those results for folks.
Yeah.
But you give folks the realistic answer, and still, are still filing appeals based on those real answers, right?
Right.
So, but it's fair that way, and I think that way they're not set up to go into the tax office potentially with an appeal in hand that's not really it's not going to pass the test.
They don't have accurate information.
That's right.
I think that's important. That's what I see is they come to my office with a few things that are inaccurate, and it's like you can't really do an appeal by the way. If you've got complete, well, let's just say 2-3 years, they're not just going to lower your tax value, by the way, if you've got inaccurate information. So definitely you got to go to them with the right stuff, the right accurate comparables. And we're talking, what do y'all usually, let's get that question real quick. An appraiser and a realtor usually pulls from the same bucket of sold comparables, and I'm talking 6 months. 6 months back, we try 2-3 miles. If it's rural, maybe going out more. But what is your guidelines as the tax assessor of what really should be a sold comparable?
Yeah, and so taxes are a little bit different in the sense that we still are pulling those comparable properties, and we're looking at those same parameters, 6 months, maybe up to a year in certain cases where we don't have enough data, and can go beyond that. Like you said, in 08, 09, we're trying to find qualified transactions that are occurring. So willing buyer, willing seller, we all know that definition. And so that's what we're looking for to set our rates within our system. Once again, we're utilizing or performing mass appraisal. And so subsequent to bringing in all that sales data into our system, we're then able to look at statistical data across all the different neighborhoods throughout a county to make sure that the valuations are where they should be because we are doing such a large scale. So there's some statistical measures that we use, certain things like our sales ratio, our coefficient of dispersion, our price-related differential, all mean nothing to the general public, but in our office, in our world, they all have very much meaning that we utilize to make sure that our numbers are accurate.
That's important. That's good to hear, as far as how I don't think nobody in the public really quite understands how you guys, actually find the value. So that's good to hear. I mean, that's good for public knowledge for sure. We're pulling, in other words, I don't want to be pulling, that's good for me to hear too. I don't want to be pulling different information, and sending somebody along their way, and y'all be pulling it from a different, variations of value. So that's very interesting and very good to hear. All right. Well, if you've got anything for us in the Hepler Realty land, you ask any question you've got. But I think we've asked the tax wizard enough questions here, and we will close this one out, episode 1. And we appreciate you coming today and appreciate you taking your time out of your busy schedule, and hope to have you back.
Thanks for having me, Nate. Appreciate it.
You got it. Thank you, sir. Y'all have a great day. See you later.